Hey, lovely people, how you doing? So this week is a little bit different. I've just found myself here, gotten completely lost. Well, I say completely lost. I got to the very last bit and then...
I got stuck.
I got stuck and then had to do a kind of a 3-point turnish. I thought the van was just going to have like mud all up her, but she doesn't look too bad. So I am Jenna Platt. I am that nurse who asks questions on social media, and this week it is a little bit different, whereas I'll be the one answering the questions. So would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, so I'm Travis. You might have seen me at the front line of protests over the past 2 years, and well, I'm just here to speak to Jenna. I actually spoke to her just before she started her mission with the sandwich board, and little did I know what he was about to undertake, really, and how, quite pivotal it was. So it's good to catch up with you again.
Yeah, you too. It seems like such a long time ago.
Yes.
Yeah, and I don't know, I just feel like time has kind of like, in some ways it's gone really fast, and then other times it's like gone quite slow. It's really bizarre. I need some time to kind of reflect on everything that's happened before I kind of like catch up with myself, I think.
But you decided to jump into a van instead.
Yeah. yeah, I did. Why stop when you can just keep on going?
Yeah, right. And I think it's quite telling now that the real carnage and the chaos and the madness and the pressure is sort of calmed down from the peak of the COVID measures. It's really quite telling to see who's still doing stuff, who's still trying to help humanity and has creative ways to get the word out about, because it's not over yet, It's like things have calmed down, the COVID measures, but in my eyes we defeated them in many ways, but we're still going. So this is a brilliant idea, I've got to say. I don't think I've seen it before. So what was the inspiration for you starting this? Why did you decide to get a van? And
so I actually got the van for because of the sense. So we are parked on a bit of a slope as well. So if you see us kind of like
yes.
moving around, it's because we're like I don't know what the angles are, but we're in a bit of an angle. But I'm not moving the van. We're parked and we're here and we're recording. I'm not moving it now.
Yes.
I daren't move it. Yeah. So I actually, because of the censorship with the sandwich board, what I realised, the reason why I had the sandwich board was because of the censorship, because...
I was going to say, how do you censor a sandwich board?
Yeah, exactly. But the struggle was that the only people that saw me were the people that walked past me or took pictures of me and then shared it on their social media. So I wanted kind of more people to see. So once I finished the walk, I was going to do a Against Vaccine Passport tour, kind of similar to the one that I did where I did all the cities, but I was going to include Ireland this time as well and get on the ferry. So I got this van, and the initial idea was to wrap it in Against Vaccine Passports stuff so that the people on the motorways and things could see it, and if nothing else, at least spark conversation while they're commuting to work or stuck in traffic or whatever. And then they dropped them. They said we're not having them, and I'd got a van. So so I was stuck with this van, thinking, what am I going to do? And somehow, and I don't know how it happened, but I decided a mobile podcast would be a good idea.
I think it's brilliant, eh?
Thank you.
And so you said you've already had, was it like 20 interviews before we started? Who have you had on so far then? How's it been?
Yeah, so unfortunately, didn't quite work out with the editor. So I've been kind of a little bit behind schedule. And it was a huge learning curve for me of then going through that process over a long period of time and then having to speed up that process and try and get it sorted. But also not wanting to... the same thing to happen again. So to make sure that I had several podcasts that were edited and ready and scheduled rather than working by a week thingy. So who have I had on? So I was the first one. So I did like kind of an introduction, and that helped me to kind of get familiar with the equipment and things. And that was more for the audience who didn't know who I was, didn't maybe know what I'd done before. Then my husband was on. So I did an interview with him, because very often people would say, does your husband not support you? And
why would they say that?
Because he wasn't visible.
Okay.
He wasn't visible. He wasn't walking with me.
I see, yes.
When actually, it was because he supported me so much that I was able to do so much. So I guess it was just to thank him because it was a team effort, and also for people to hear it from his side as well, because that would have been very different from my side. So he was my second guest. And then I interviewed Lorna, who was a friend that I've made on Instagram. Lorna is 70, and I wanted to interview her because she is a drug addict in recovery. And I wanted to talk about judgment and identity and what that meant for her, especially, I guess, with her age as well. People probably wouldn't suspect that was why I was talking to her. So I wanted to talk to her about that. I've interviewed Leilani. We talked about social media. Hill Farmer.
Who's Hill Farmer?
Hill Farmer. So that's Gareth Wyn Jones. And he is on Country File as well. So he's got quite a big social media presence, and he was my first on location interview. And oh my gosh, getting up to his farm in Wales in this van, oh no, it was chaos because it was just so narrow. And then I got there and they're like, oh, did you not take this road? And I was like, no, the sat nav said this one. And then when I left, like he gave me like a little food basket with some fresh food and some meat, and he was lovely. He was talking about he was talking about the vegan diet. He was talking about marketing. He was talking about how, you know, supermarkets can just say, nope, we're not having that field of crop, destroy it, and that's that. And then also about the £100,000 that the government are offering to farmers for them to retire early.
Is that it though? Really? 100,000 doesn't seem like much.
No, but I guess, you know, with an ageing population of farmers,
yeah,
it would be quite a nice option for some people. I
suppose. At the end of your days, but that sounds like a very terrible thing to trust the government with all our food production, eh?
Well, I guess the thing is, though, and like most people, I think if you don't see the integral part that you play, it's very difficult to realise what an impact you as an individual can have.
But so they're going to pay the farmers to retire, but then what? Who takes over?
Well, that's where the printed synthetic, whatever chemicals they've put in it.
I see. So they just want to shut down the farms completely. No one takes it over.
As far as I know.
Wow.
As far as I know, yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. And so you said this guy was a vegan, huh?
No. He was talking about the vegan diet and how it's marketed, and how they're blaming cows for farmers for climate change.
Yes. The climate change is a big one. I think that's going to be one of the next pivotal agendas that's been rolling out for quite some time. But as COVID is kind of done away with now, thankfully, the fact that cows play a role in changing the climate and that they're like the enemy of the people now, I think that's madness. So it's good to hear that he was on the same page. Yeah.
And I think with kind of all these mainstream narratives, like everyone is kind of got their own. So he's, talking about the farmer's perspective, whereas I was talking about a different perspective. But I think that, all of these mainstream narratives, the one thing they've got in common is taxing people and money and getting more money out of people.
It does seem to be that the more people get pushed, the more people wake up, right? So it's like this dual action. I mean, what are your thoughts on the future? Do you see there being a grand awakening, or do you think the bad guys are going to win?
I think there has been a grand awakening.
Yes.
I think there has.
And what do you think caused that?
COVID.
Right?
Yeah. So I before this, I would kind of describe myself as savvy, as in I didn't kind of get caught up with the belief that I had to have all of these material items and that I had to reach all of these milestones and things like that. So, and I didn't watch the news, and, I've never voted and kind of believe that kind of politicians are either corrupt or corruptible. So I would kind of say I was savvy before, but now it's really opened my eyes to, and now I've paid more attention.
So savvy but not awake.
Yeah.
Okay, that's an interesting way to put it. I like that.
Yeah, that's what I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it definitely has changed a lot of people's perspectives. I think a lot of people have made changes, real positive changes of how they can be less reliant on government support and things like that. Whether that's their lifestyle choices through what they're buying, what they're eating, how they're living, who they're spending their time with,
yes,
how much time they're spending on social media and things like that. I think a lot of people have made a lot of good changes. Will the bad guys win? No.
Doesn't look like it.
No, they can't.
Right?
No film ends with the bad guys winning.
Yes. And yeah, absolutely. It seems now that like GPs are getting really full, they're not seeing people in person or providing anywhere near as a good service, people are going to alternative healing methods now, which is amazing. It's like, I think that it's almost made, it's like polarized thing. It's woke so many people up, and those who have become awake or already were awake have gotten more connected. They're becoming stronger and empowered and creating actual really viable solutions to how we can live. So I think it's very inspiring, and people like you, that what you've been doing, just leading the way, and it's absolutely essential for people to be doing that.
I think accepting people's diversity is one of the things that has been really important with going to the protests, for example. You know, it's been, everyone has been different. Everyone is there for a different reason, but we all share that same value. So we've all seen the importance of other people doing things differently. So, you know, I might be talking to people, and one of the things that I said while I was walking was, all I can do is talk and walk. Like, I'm not a scientist. Numbers aren't my thing. I'll forget them. It'll stress me out too much trying to read the most latest paper with the latest statistic, because it'll cause me so much anxiety, because as soon as you get a 1% out, that's it. You're discredited for everything. So that's not how my brain works. But what I can do is I can walk and talk. That's my kind of contribution. And when you look at people like Lucas Lyon, he raps. That's his contribution. You know, so he's not walking and talking, but he's also, you know, using his skills and abilities in that way. And I think that's one of the things that I've really enjoyed, is people's diversity and where different people are coming from, and really embracing that, rather than, you know, having a complete intolerance of when people do things differently.
Absolutely. And how long did you actually do your walk for?
So it was 8 months. It wasn't total.
Wow.
So I'd go back home for a couple of days, walk for a couple of days, go home for a week, walk for a week. So it wasn't a complete 8 months full. But the total walk, from when I walked to London, when I stayed in London for 3 weeks, and then walked every city and a couple of towns, was 8 months in total.
And what are some of like the highlights? What was like the best moments of that 8 months?
So there's one moment that really sticks out, and I should have thought about this on the way, because I can see what town it might have been Hereford. And there was this guy who I was talking to, and I hugged him, and he was like, gosh, no one's hugged me for 14 months.
Oh, yeah, wow.
Yeah. And he was telling me a story. He just got his wife an anniversary present, and he was a lovely guy. And he just listened, and he gave me his perspective. And as I say, like, I hugged him, and then there was this like realization that, gosh, you know, I've not really let anyone in my space for all this time. And
no, your realization.
No, his realization. Yes. So that was one of the things that definitely sticks out. Another one was in St Albans. That was a really tricky city. They didn't like me there at all. One of the girls, I remember, came up to me and she told me to leave her city because my sign was hurting her feelings.
Literally those words. Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then when I explained what I was doing and that she was able to walk away, but the nurses, you know, who were too scared to speak out, you know, had all these reasons didn't have the freedom like she did to walk away from me when it was upsetting her. She said, well, why do the feelings of the nurses who are too scared to speak out mean more than mine? So it was quite shocking, really.
Yes.
St Albans was a bit rough. Lancaster, big up to Lancaster. That was a fantastic city. There was so much chit chat. It was great. Really, really enjoyed that. Blackpool, oh my gosh, the weather. The weather was grim in Blackpool, but the people were so friendly. And I remember that I was just kind of walking around. I didn't really have a plan of like what route I was going to take or anything. And there was a guy actually handing out light papers who hadn't heard of me before. So we got talking, and then I remember we went for a coffee afterwards in this like really cool bar that I never would have found if I hadn't have met up with him. And then another thing that sticks out for me is when I was in London. So it felt very Anne Frank, to be honest. And And not that I'm comparing what I did to what happened with her, but it was like I had to be hidden. So there was this shop, and I'm not going to name the shop or anything like that, but this shop kind of welcomed me in, and they're like, if you need to go to the toilet, if you want a drink, want to have a drink. So I went to say hello, and I was sat on this little stool thing, and they were just talking to me, but then every time a customer came in, we'd have to be quiet.
Okay.
And then we could talk again when the customer left. And it was just so bizarre. And it was so obvious. Like, there was just this unspoken rule that as soon as a customer came in, we all had to talk about the weather. And it really, really highlighted for me how, when you see like the rise of Hitler and how they controlled the population and how they were self-censoring.
And people would rat their neighbour out and stuff.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it was there on ITV, wasn't it? Like Riches for Snitches, about grassing up your neighbour who was having a party during lockdown and stuff like that. There are definitely a lot of parallels. And that's one of the things that I want to do, like go through all the parallels. Because people get really upset when you compare it to like 1930s Germany. But the tactics, like you can compare the tactics that we use. You can compare all of the censorship, the control of the media, any opposition, like you say, grassing on your neighbour. We had the COVID wardens.
Right, the yellow jackets.
Yeah, that said 2 meters apart whilst they were gossiping like right next to each other. So it's there are definitely a lot of parallels that I really want to go through and really look at that, and I'll probably write a blog on that, because I think that is just so it really interested me, the parallels, and people get very upset when you compare it. And I think that one of the responses is that, oh, you're being so disrespectful to what happened, and it's like, no. Like, how can you show the victims of what happened any more respect than not letting it happen again, or talking about it? If we just don't talk about it, it doesn't mean that it didn't happen, and it doesn't mean that those tactics won't be used again.
Absolutely. And that was something that sort of stuck out for me as well. You think, how could people go along with that? You hear about the stories, what was happening, and then you see it. You see the people en masse wearing the masks and just completely complying without really critically thinking and just being absorbed by the fear, and you're like, that's how they did it. That's how they did it. So the parallels are huge, man. And like you say, if we don't learn from them, it might happen again. Yeah,
and I was doing so I'm doing an online course at the moment, and
are you teaching it or you're delivering it?
No, I'm doing a master's in transactional analysis.
What's that?
So transactional analysis is a framework, psychology. She's in counselling, and it's the adult, parent and child within us all. So I'd kind of describe it as like you set a traffic lights, the circles on top of each other. So you've got your parent, adult, child. And then if you were to put those two sets of traffic lights next to each other, what you would be looking at is how people are communicating and what impact you're having. So we are adult to adult at the moment. We are talking, we're not being critical of one another. We're not having a tantrum. Whereas if you consider so I remember going up to people, going to supermarkets, and people would be saying, you need to put your mask on. You need to do this.
Yes.
Well, that's coming from a critical parent perspective. It's not coming from an adult perspective. Because if it was coming from an adult perspective, the question might be, why are you choosing not to wear a mask? Oh, that's why you're choosing not to wear a mask.
Yeah, that's a totally different framing, right? Yes.
Or from like a child's perspective is more of just put your mask on. Please, I'm just so
I think I got
tired.
more of that. I'm so scared, please put your mask on.
So it depends. Like if you're having a tantrum, and there can also be the nurturing parent as well, which is like, come on, it just do this, and it shows you care, and just put it on, and we'll get a colour that matches your t-shirt.
Yeah.
So that's the nurturing parent. It can be a bit smothering sometimes. Whereas I spend a lot of my time in adult and free child, which is quite rebellious, don't necessarily follow the rules and things like that. And I can also have a conversation with people. So I found that helped me a lot when I was looking at what was going on. And why was I talking about TA? Oh yeah, so I was in one of the classes, and I can't remember what it was we were actually talking about, but she said within a group setting you have to ask yourself the question, how much of yourself would you be willing to lose to remain part of the group?
Yeah, boom, good question.
Yeah,
Some people everything, pretty much their entire dignity and their value as a human being.
Yeah.
Yes. So when did you start learning about the transactional analysis specifically?
So I started learning about that. So I had counselling when I was probably about 20 and then probably about 27.
Okay, there's quite a big difference in the 7 years between the sessions, eh?
Yeah. Just big stressful events that happened in my life at that time.
Sure.
And I was in a training, I was delivering some training, and we got into, so this is part of transactional analysis TA, we got into a game, what we call the drama triangle. So there's the persecutor, victim and rescuer. So my kind of default role is the rescuer. So I will have someone who will say, why haven't you done my washing? I'm like, I'll do it, I'll get it done. And then they might flip into the victim role and be like, oh my gosh, well, I needed those jeans now. Oh no, I'll do it, it's fine, I'll do it. And then we can have this dance where I then get sick of them asking me to do the washing. It's like, look, I am sick of you asking me to do the washing. I'm sick of it. And then they might say, oh, well, it's just today. Like, I don't normally ask you, I just need them. And then I will flip back to rescue and be like, oh yeah, do you know what? You're right, you do need them. So that's a very poor example, but
I understand though,
yeah.
I get it, yes.
So I was delivering some training, and I was in that role where the class were flipping from persecutor to victim, and I was constantly trying to rescue out of these roles. I drove home, I was completely exhausted, and then I had a counselling session. And then I spoke to the counsellor about that training session, and then that's where she said it sounds like the drama triangle. So I read about that, and then I read more and more, and now I'm doing, or at least trying to do, my master's.
That's fascinating, yeah. It sounds like a very interesting subject to be getting into.
Absolutely. And there is me and Becky, who I met on the TA course last year, are doing a series, hopefully by the end of January. So we'll be doing 10 very short videos which will explain each section with better examples.
No jeans.
No jeans. I sound like I don't know where that example comes from, but yeah, no jeans.
That sounds like what's from episode 2 with your husband. There's like some previous jeans trauma there or something. Yes. And so what were you actually doing before this all kicked off? Like, because you were... No,
I was in India finding myself.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a whole journey then. What was happening in India?
Well, I only lasted 3 weeks because I had to come back because of COVID. I was supposed to be there for 5 months.
You found yourself in a different way, I suppose.
Yeah, I did. I definitely did, yeah.
Yeah, right. So when you say finding yourself, I mean, what do you mean? Is it like a spiritual sort of quest?
I was just sick of shitty relationships with...
Okay.
shitty boys, to be honest, and I just wanted to get away. So I went on a lot of my stories seem to be around training. So I went on a training course.
Jeans.
No. I went on a training course, and there was a table full of women, and then there was a guy sat on his own. So I sat next to the guy. He was telling me about his family in India, and that night I drove home, put my house up for sale, and booked a one-way ticket to India. So that was 2019, October-ish time. And then somehow all these ex-boyfriends came into my life in various forms, flowers from one, e-card from another, hand-delivered letter from one. And from my husband now, I actually got an invoice.
It's an interesting collection of items.
Yeah, I got an invoice from him. So we'd been split up for 3 years. And then I emailed him to say that, I've got this invoice, I'm going to India, I'm moving house, I'm not going to be able to forward the mail on. He needs to sort it out, and he asked if he could apologise. So he did.
And for what? Sending the invoice?
No, that was an accident. He apologised for how we split up. Okay. So he did, and then 12 days later we're in Vegas getting married. So that was
that's fast.
The 2nd of January.
That's one hell of an invoice.
Yeah, hell of an apology. Took him 3 years.
Yes.
So that was
Wow.
the 2nd of January 2020. And then I still went to India because that was the plan even before me and Rob got married. And then I lasted 3 weeks because I had to get the last flight home.
So what were you actually doing in India, you know? Because people say, yeah, finding myself, but like, what is that?
I just wanted to get out. The irony is I wanted to get out of the hustle and bustle. So I went to one of the busiest places, if not the busiest place in the world. Yeah, I just wanted to have no responsibility for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
No responsibility, no pressure, just kind of...
So did you go to like some like yoga place or something?
No,
or something, visit some guru?
booked a flight.
And
I
just
booked a flight. That was it. And
relate to
the plan was to spend 5 months just kind of wandering around. As I said, put the house up for sale. And then I was coming home for my dog's 13th birthday. No, it must have been his 12th birthday then. That was my plan. That was all I had planned.
Okay. Yeah, that's fascinating. I think that's anyone who's considering traveling, that's actually a really, really good way to do it.
Just not with the COVID stuff.
Yeah, not when the world has, gone mad with COVID. I don't think we're going to see anything, well, at least with COVID, I don't think we'll see that again. That's actually something we get into in a minute. It's like, what could perhaps happen next? Could that happen again? But just to go that like spontaneous one-way ticket, let's just see what happens. It just opens yourself up to some magic.
Yeah, and I met great people when I was there. I learnt a lot of lessons and I saw what fear could do to people because people started treating me differently the more that the news was reporting the numbers. I didn't know where I was going to be able to get a taxi back because people just didn't want me anywhere near them. So yeah, it was really interesting how differently people treat you. And that was just due to fear. Mm-hmm. That was that. If they were reporting someone who didn't have, because they're on about Italy at the time. So if they had someone who looked different and they didn't have white skin, they would be the same to them. Like, I didn't take it personally, but I really, really noticed the speed in which people will treat you differently because of what's on the news.
Right. It is a testament to the power that it has in the minds of the masses.
Yeah. And this is just me thinking out loud. I'm not controlled opposition. I don't have any access.
Have you been called that yet?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
Which I think is so funny, because normally the irony when people call you controlled opposition is because they are trying to control what you are saying.
Yes.
So you're not saying this that I want you to say, so obviously you're controlled opposition.
Right.
No.
And it's a badge of honour. Once you do get called controlled opposition, it's like you obviously are making enough waves, you've got enough of an influence somewhere that people could even consider that you might be controlled opposition.
I don't know, I'm just too busy for that. But it would be nice if someone paid for the van and paid for all my walking and did all that. Yeah, right. It would be nice, but no, that didn't happen. I did see on someone's Twitter bio, they just said controlled opposition, and I was like, oh my gosh, I love that.
Yes.
I love that. Can they do anything now? No, I don't think they can. I think that this is a lull, and I think this is an opportunity to, while the pressure isn't on, continue the conversations. Not in a, oh my gosh, you're always banging on about that. Like, we must have other things to look forward to. And I don't know about you, but I know that I lost a lot of my life to this. I lost a lot of my time because I certainly didn't have to do anything. Me and my husband were able to pay our mortgage. We were able to work. We had, no problems really. We only invited problems into our life by doing something. And we spent such a long time away from each other because of what I was doing that we lost a great deal of quality time together. So I want to get that back. So I think continue to have conversations, but also do things that you really enjoy as well. And I think those are so important. What's the point in fighting? And if we're not, we're just going to be, we're going to forget what we're trying to achieve if we don't enjoy life.
That's wise words indeed. I have to say that I was absolutely in my fucking element fighting back against this shit.
I don't know. I'm not sure I would put it like that. I felt like I had a bit of a rough time.
So did I, but damn, that was part of the grandeur of the battle, Having been 10 years in the fight, and it was like, okay, here we go. Shit's getting really real now. Okay, let's lead the activists. Let's be at the front of the protest with a megaphone. Yes.
I don't know. I'm not used to I don't know. Yeah, I didn't find myself enjoying. I'd rather not, but it felt necessary.
Yes.
So yeah, that's where I am. I would have much rather been at home, to be honest, but it felt very necessary. And you know, I know that I've got it in me now, and certainly, you know, talking with the police and seeing like what I saw, like my eyes are open now in a different way to what they were before. I'm certainly less naive, maybe.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I've always found it much easier to like kind of defend other people. And then it really did feel like a battle. Like it really did. It felt extremely intense at times. And there was a time when, you know, my husband would be on about, oh, well, in 2 years' time, we'll be able to do this or we'll be able to do that. Or, you know, this will happen with the house. And I was like, oh my God, I can't even think about 2 days. Like, because there was just a void. There was just this black hole. I could not see anything.
Yes.
So yeah, it was, I didn't enjoy it. There were enjoyable parts and there were enjoyable people, but yeah, I'm a little bit of a baby really. So it was quite difficult to try and put on a brave face.
And that was going to be another, so we went through like some of the best parts of your experience walking around, but what were some of the worst, like where's the most vicious, or who was the worst treatment you had?
Norwich.
Oh, fucking Norwich. I hear weird things about that city, really.
Norwich. Okay, so when you saw all the football players and all of the, not the audience, what do you call them? The crowds.
Fans,
yeah. You know, that were having all of these incidents. I painted I think it was like 20 foot by 11 foot banner that said, why are players dropping dead?
Oh, yeah, nice.
And I snuck it into Norwich football ground like I was pregnant. So I had my friends, I like had it round me and I had my friend's poncho on. And there was 5 of us. And we got into Norwich football ground and it was on the news. It was on Sky Sports. So I was like, right, I'll get some coverage. I absolutely bottled it. I was like, no, it doesn't feel right at all. Like, I can't do this. And that's not like me. I tend to, once I've decided I'm going to do some, I tend to do it. But I was like, just the vibes just don't feel right at all. So we left, and we went to, I think it was Spoons, and we were like, oh my God, what losers we are. And then we went back and we just held up the banner. So we held up the banner for when the fans were walking out. Oh my gosh, like the herd mentality, crowd, like groupthink, crowd mentality, like it was vicious. They were like trying to grab it off us. And like, these are grown men. And you've got 3 women. And I'm all for equality, but I'm also like, show a little bit of respect. Like, there's no need to be like that. But they were just grabbing it. And honestly, it didn't happen. But because of how they were, because I had to say, like, you've got to put that sign down. Like, this is getting dangerous now. But I feel that if one of them had started to attack us, the crowd would have just attacked us. And
surely
it would have been
not.
Honestly, you were not there. And I am much more of someone who will underreact than overreact. And because of how the crowd were bubbling up, I just had to say, like, look, we've got to go. It is time to go. Yeah, that sounds pretty intense. It was.
So, have you ever tried anything like in the spiritual...
But it did get people talking.
Yeah, I'm sure it fucking did.
It did get people talking, but it felt very, very intense. And it also felt like if I'd have told my husband I was doing this, he would be not very happy with me right now.
Is he going to listen to this and find out?
No, he knew afterwards. But at that time I was like, oh, this is one of those things where I probably shouldn't have done it.
Never mind. But so, because you mentioned going to India, a lot of people say they're going to go to India to like get into spiritual stuff. Have you ever experimented with anything like that? Any meditation, yoga?
So I go to yoga.
Okay.
So prior to September, then everything kind of just got busy. I was going 3 days a week, so I was going Monday, Wednesday, Saturday mornings to hot pod yoga. So it's nothing like I'm not...
Oh yeah, I recently tried that. It's interesting.
What did you think?
Yeah, it's good. I mean, I think I need to try a different session though, because I already do plenty of working out, and I did this like really intense session I was sort of wanting to like do like what's it, like yin yoga or something like that, something where I actually just chill out. And this was like a workout, man, and it's hot in there, you know, you're really sweating. So I was like, no, that's not for me. But to do something like just relaxing, where you're just a bit more warmer, I think that could be quite cool.
So I think the one that I go with is called Flow. So I do like I think I do the very like novice,
But
probably what
like?
you're looking for.
Is it like really quite fast paced and intense, or is it sort of chill,
No,
relaxing?
so that'll
'Cause
be the
mine was called a
dynamic
flow,
one.
but this was like let's go flow.
Oh, I don't know then. Ours is like dynamic. That's the one I don't go to. It's the Hot Pod Flow that I go to. And that is very, I mean, it's effort. It's still effort. But yeah, with it being warmer, and there is something about being in the pod and the lights.
Do you have music as well?
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
nice, it's a sensual experience.
Yeah, and I take a little like linseed eye mask. So when I get there,
Linseed eye mask.
yeah, it's got like lavender and stuff in.
Okay.
So when I get there,
For your eyes.
Just lie down and then just
Interesting.
like a bit more sensory deprivation.
Okay.
I really like that.
Yes.
So yeah, I do that. And if people would ever say, "Oh, are you religious?" I'd be like, "No, do you know what? I'm not religious. I would never disrespect anybody else's views or opinions. I'm just always of the belief that I will listen and I will respect, but also respect that I don't believe in that. And I would always say that I was just quite spiritual.
I think that's way better, my opinion.
I'd have to agree.
Yes. Well, there are some parts of religion that you can sort of look at and think, yeah, that's a good idea. But then there's a lot of the dogma, and you can see how it's in many ways been manipulated and used to control people throughout the ages. So I think we are sort of seeing in the UK like sort of quite a strong moving away from Christianity. Like, especially if I think of all my friends going through school, and none of them are religious, and no one ever spoke about going to church or anything like that. But then there's like, as you get your thoughts on this, there's like almost like a vacuum that's sort of appearing in the collective consciousness that could do with some addressing. And part of my work now, when moving out of COVID, is to address things like this, is like the value system that people have. Because if you're just left in like moral relativism, I think that can be quite a dangerous territory, you know? So if you have like that there is still some sort of divine framework, a better way to live, you could say, that would lead to like longer term harmonious societies and interactions, but it doesn't have to be like the 10 commandments and some man up in the sky. So what do you think about, do you know what I mean when I say moral relativism?
No.
So essentially that's sort of like where everything is subjective to a very high degree. And I think it's like perspectives, lenses that you can put on for certain situations and that, but I think there is actually still like a divine framework. Like, it makes sense if you want to have a harmonious society for any length of time to have integrity within it. You know, to be honest to your word when no one is looking. Mm-hmm. So, but then it's like, okay, so if we're not subscribing to the Bible or the 10 Commandments per se, what do we use as our moral reference code? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think people need something.
Right.
I think people, for a lot of people, faith is really, really important to them, and it brings them peace during really difficult times. So I think there is definitely something that as a culture we need to kind of see as being bigger than us.
Yes.
But I think for me it's anything. It's the extremes of anything is too much. So I think as long as it is balanced and it is bringing you joy and it is not kind of dividing you from anyone else, because I guess what I'm seeing, one of the things that when I was walking was, it was agree with me or you're wrong. And I just don't buy into that at all. Like, I think you can have friendships that have different, let's say, religious beliefs, but those values that you talk about, integrity, for example, like you share those.
Yes. So
I think, for me, it's the extremes of anything is not good.
Absolutely. And so what do you think about, let's just get a little bit esoteric here, because it's a really interesting question, and obviously no one really knows the answer, but what do you think happens when we die?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. Do you know what? When I was walking, there was a lot of talk about like star seeds, and you'd kind of a lot of people saying that you have already signed up to do this. And I'm not going to lie, but that brought me a lot of strength. Like, it's not something that I'd heard before, but thinking, you know, while I was walking on my own, kind of with my own thoughts, thinking, right, Jen, well, you've already signed up for this, so you kind of, you know, you got to see it through. Like, that really helped me. But what did make me sad was thinking that, like, me and Rob might disappear and not. I think there's a film, gosh, is it Guardian the Galaxy, where does one of them come from space? Does the guy come from space and the mum's from Earth? No,
I wouldn't know.
And then he kind of just like fizzles out, and I don't know, I just had this image of like Rob just fizzling out, and it just made me really sad. Yeah, it made me really sad. So what was the question? Ask me what the question was again.
What happens when we die?
Oh, what happens when we die?
Yes.
I don't know what happens when we die.
Though, really. I mean, there's like, you get, you know, past near-death experiences where people recall what they think happens when they're like nearly dead.
And you have those cases where people, you know, are very young and they are recalling events from, I remember one in particular where this young girl was recalling events from another village, and her family took her and she was able to describe the house, and like the family felt a connection with this child. And there's a few events like that where people are talking about things. Oh, I don't know. What do you think?
So my philosophy, I guess, which is taken from a few different places. Also, once I kind of experienced what happens when we die, potentially on a Amanita Muscaria trip, but that's a whole other story. I do believe in reincarnation. It seems to make the most sense, especially when you look at the different caliber of people and how some people are born like with this natural talent for certain things. Perhaps, you know, in a past life they've already mastered it, and you get this like veil of forgetting every time you come back. I do think that there is like some sort of recapitulation, and you go through, you know, when people say like their life flashes before their eyes. Mm-hmm. Well, on this trip that I had, that literally happened, and I think that is part of it. And you sort of have a life review, and you sort of go over what happened, and then you sort of plan your next life. Or there is, and this is what a lot of Christianity speaks about, there's like, you go to the next heaven or dimension or whatever. I think that actually might happen once you've learned the lessons of this reality. Once you've mastered 3D, you like graduate and go to the next level. But then also with that perspective, it's like, okay, so where was I before I was a human? Well, maybe you were like a dog or a cat, and you learned all the lessons of being an animal. And then maybe your last lives as a dog or a cat, you were like someone's pet. You know, it's just like as close as you can get to being a human without actually being a human. And then this fits in nicely to the perspective of why some people are so fucking stupid is because they might have just recently been an animal.
Okay.
Yes. That's just, it puts in perspective, and I
don't know, I've seen some quite clever sheepdogs.
Yes.
And to be honest, we've got two Vizslas.
Some that might even be smarter than some humans, hey?
Yeah, we've got two Vizslas, and they are definitely training us. Yes.
But obviously, you know, this would be interesting to get into, like the capacity a human has, the potential a human has, is because when you're seeing an animal, especially in its natural environment, or if it's had some training from humans, usually you're seeing it in its prime environment, right? It's like at the pinnacle of what a cow could be or a dog could be. Humans, a lot of them, in my eyes, are barely, even myself included in many ways, barely scratching the surface of what a human can do.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Like spirituality, and you start unlocking extrasensory perception or these abilities that we may well have that we've lost or are dormant that we could perhaps reactivate. Yeah, I think there's huge scope for what we can actually achieve as being a human. And yes, and it's kind of a little bit sinister and a little bit dark, but I've also pondered deeply, like, why is it that there are people that, like in Africa, and they have a life and they're alive for like a couple of years and that's it, you know, they're dead, and that's like en masse, that's happening a lot. And it's like, why would that be like that? Is it possible that these are their first ever lives as a human? Like genuinely, just like curiosity. Is it the first time of being a human? This is what it's like. You're not going to be here for very long, but here you go, here's that experience. And then after a while, you might get born into a society where you actually live past 5, and you get to experience what it means to be a human to some degree.
I don't know. But
it's pretty metaphysical, yes.
I do like the idea of kind of, I don't know, I guess the idea of like a tortured soul and then having to like learn the lessons, because certainly I have spoke about living the same year over and over again. So, I'd be making the same mistakes over and over again. And the thought of someone doing that for their whole life and then coming back and then doing it until you learn that mistake.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, that fills me with sadness. Like, I'd hope that
well, if we got
able to fast track that.
Well, yeah, you'd hope so, right? Learning lessons quickly is definitely got to be the best way. But yeah, I think eventually most people get it. I don't think you can ever stay stagnant for too long. But then you've mentioned an interesting concept as well that I think also is slightly misunderstood in some degree, which is karma, which is a very interesting subject. And it's like, okay, but then there's like this line of thinking, the bad guys will just one day get their karma. Well, maybe, but what if they've actually chosen consciously to be evil, and we do need evil to exist? And then this also ties into what maybe happens when we die, and there's like another level of reality. Maybe evil continues on as well. So you've got like the really good positive people who then go to next level and they're a positive human being or positive being. Then the same with the evil. What good would it be to have a really evil soul person to learn the lessons of what it means to be a good person if they don't actually want to, they haven't chosen it? Like the opposite way around. Imagine if you're a good person and you've chosen to be good out of the kindness of your heart, whatever, you want to serve people. You don't need to learn how to be a psychopath, like to actually act and live it out. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I was watching something a couple of weeks ago and he was kind of describing utopia, and I don't think that is achievable. I don't think
maybe
that's
not
realistic.
on this reality and on this planet.
Yeah, I don't think that's. I
kind
just
of need
think
evil in a way.
That like we need pain. We pain is a gateway to help us through lots of difficult times, and feeling physical pain is a warning that we need to do something or not do something. I'm not saying that people should be in pain for all sorts of other reasons, but it does help us, and if we didn't have it, that would be in a lot of danger as well. But this guy was kind of describing utopia, and I just don't think that is possible. I think there's parts of human nature, human behaviour, and who do just want power and control and will be in the guise of I'm here to help you when they're not there to push whatever their agenda is. Like, I just think that is human nature, and we can probably see those traits if we just kind of like put a drone in random bits across the world, we'd probably see those parts playing out.
And have you seen the film The Matrix? So do you remember that scene where Agent Smith has Morpheus and Morpheus is trapped and he's talking about the human condition? He's like looking out to the skyscrapers, and I've seen this film religiously, so I can like picture this directly in my mind. But he's talking about how there was like this simulation run where humans had everything they could possibly want. Everything was like bliss and perfect, and it was all happy and smiley rainbows. And the human mind rejected it. Entire crops were lost, I think was his actual word. And then it was like talking about how maybe humanity needs suffering to define its existence. And it's quite a dark, sinister scene, but when you actually think about it, it's like maybe Smith's actually right. At least at this level of development right now, I think so. I think suffering is a necessary part. And then that was like, which I did a video about this recently, it's like, do we actually need to defeat evil? Is it we're going to take down the Matrix and the bad guys, which could be possible, and I've devoted a lot of effort and time trying to kind of do that? Or is it that we get it more in check and make it a little bit easier for good people to transcend the Matrix? Or we're getting metaphysical in the van?
I don't know if the majority of people want to be happy or want to be content.
Whoa, that's a big one.
Yeah, I don't think they know how to be, because we are so wired up to having a threat, a worry, a stress, to be in a rush, that I think those feelings of being content or happy make many people uncomfortable. Interesting.
And would you say that's like a product of humanity of where it is, or is it the conditioning and the upbringing from this society that causes that?
So I think we've always got to be on the lookout for a threat, and I think that's never going to go away. So think about social media today. I would be more likely to notice negative comments rather than the really nice ones. And although I would reflect on them at a later time, those feelings that it would evoke with the negative ones, where I would maybe consider longer like, well, are they right? And I think that's because we need to look out for a threat, and the nice comments aren't a threat. That's the negative ones that we deem as a threat. So I think that is always there, and I think there is a lot of conditioning where our norm of stress is, let's say, a level 8. So for us to go to a level 4 of stress will cause us to be quite disorientated, because we are just so high stress. And that, I don't very often travel like office hours, but I have done the last couple of weeks. And I just think, gosh, this is hideous. Being stuck in this traffic. This is your Monday to Friday 9 till 5. This is awful. Or I got petrol a couple of weeks ago, and everyone's just mad and furious and in a rush and impatient, and it's like, oh, this is yuck. Oh, it's horrible. But for some people, that's all they're going to do for 40 years.
I couldn't imagine.
I just think that they wouldn't know what it was like not to have that, because that's then become part of their identity. Some people you'll see and they'll be like, oh, I'm so stressed, and they are stressed forever, because that's become part of their identity. Who are they without that stress? So I think a lot of people are in the pursuit of happiness. However, if they were to find it, they wouldn't know what to do with it.
Yes. Powerful. Interesting.
That's what I think.
Yeah, wow. I thought that too. I wondered, so say we are actually successful and we defeat the Matrix and we've gotten all the corruption out of politics, there's some good guys in there, everything's looking cool. Well, then what do we fucking do?
I think for a lot of people, they'll be looking for the next fight.
Interesting. Yeah, I think so too. Yeah. So then it's like, yes, do we need to defeat evil? Maybe not. But
if you look back through history, and this is someone that I want to interview, I want to find someone that I can bring on the podcast who knows more about this than me. But if we think about all the patterns of cultures and what our problems were, so war, famine, eating, being warm enough, having enough money, health. If you look back at, say, when we were on the witch hunt era, they'd have those same problems. There'd be famine and there'd be health issues. The people would be worrying about where their next meal is going to come from. They'd be worrying about if they're going to stay warm enough. And then if you think about now, people today are worried about if they're going to be warm enough. Some people today are worried about where their next meal is coming from. So I don't think our problems are new. I think they're just packaged differently.
Yes.
And there's a lot of things that we say are there to help us and to help make our lives easier. Cars, well, the witch hunt era, they would have horses which would slow things down, but then we're now zipping around everywhere like maniacs, on the motorway. And honestly, the amount of cars that I saw that had crashed on the way here, I couldn't believe.
What, really?
Yeah.
Oh dear.
I was so surprised.
What's all about?
But the cars haven't made our life easier.
You don't think so, hey?
No, we have now added extra stress. Whereas, think about when they had a horse.
Then you got to look after the horse shits everywhere, you got to feed it.
Yeah, but you're not trying to be here, be there, do that. Think about Christmas Day. People spend the whole day just whizzing around everywhere. If you only had a horse, well, you could only go so far.
Yes.
So I think that we say that these things are to make our lives easier, and they haven't. Emails, so we don't send 5 letters a week. I don't know how many letters people would send. We now send 50 emails a day. The speed in which we expect a response and the speed in which we have to respond, that's really time consuming. So I don't think emails have made our life easier. I think they've added an extra stress. Interesting.
Yes. And there are some people who have sort of grown up before this technology who are like, yeah, life just isn't better now. But then it's as well, I think the potential is really quite huge with what you can do in this era. If you can deal with the stress of this world and the technology and how it can interfere with what may have been a more natural, if you like, way of living. You know, when people were maybe more in touch with the earth and walking around maybe barefoot or stuff like that. Because I often think about it, and I think it can be quite underappreciated sometimes, is like if I make a video, and okay, not every video I make gets like 10,000 views, but sometimes it does. And I make this video, and it can take me a few minutes to record it, a few minutes to write a caption. I put it up there in a minute, 5 minutes of effort. Tens of thousands of people could watch me whilst I'm about doing something else. It blows my mind. It's really quite amazing. Like right now, someone could be listening to your other shows. They could be watching your videos on your Instagram. You're out there, you're helping them in the virtual world whilst you're sitting here recording the show in the van.
But that's the difference between using these tools and being used by them.
Yes.
And, you know, I've been very conscious that I would create more content than I would consume. And
that's a good mindset, yes.
That I would, you know, so I did a talk the other day in Buxton, and I said that I'm probably the least informed person in the room about COVID, because I have spent no time reading into it because I didn't need to.
Bad shit's happening. Let's get out there and fight it.
Well, for me, the only thing that I needed to know about was informed voluntary consent and the coercion. Like for me, it was all about the behaviour. It didn't matter what that argument was. It could have been anything, but we can't coerce people to have an intervention. So it didn't matter what the intervention was. It didn't matter what the reason was. And I intentionally didn't want to read about it because, one, it would change my message, and I was very aware of who I wanted to talk to. And there was plenty of other people that were doing all the reading that were far better qualified than me to do that. So let them do that. And then I could have either spent time reading all of that, whereas I don't feel that it would have prepared me as much for what I was doing. So I made the conscious effort to spend my time learning more about communication, learning more about negotiation, learning more about different debating styles. And for me, that was a much better way of spending my time learning rather than learning everything about that. So I know very little about it because I didn't need to. There was plenty of other people that knew a lot more, and that was where their skill set was.
And so what was your talk you was giving in Buxton?
It was for the Stand in the Park bunch. Okay. Yeah, there was a few of them together.
They're still going strong. Is that Stand in the Park?
Well, it was in a lovely venue in Buxton, and yeah, I'm rubbish at. I can't even estimate how many chips to put in the oven, so I wouldn't like to tell you how many people were in the room. But there was a fair few, you know, and it was a Tuesday evening, so it's fantastic to see all the kind of connections that have stayed.
Absolutely, and that is a really important, I guess, thing that could be overlooked is the right people getting connected. Mm-hmm. Just this Saturday, I was at an Empower the People event, and it was really quite inspiring to see just all these people like, yeah, so this happened and now we're together, and this, you know, these events have brought me this, and then it's, you know, and then also like people saying how, especially, you know, when you put the time and effort in to set up events, and people are like, yeah, I met my partner at this event, you know, and our lives just were totally transformed. It's amazing. So that's happening. It's happening a lot, and that's where the power is, when people like get connected, the right people get connected. And yes, and so I was curious, like whilst you was doing the sandwich board, and did you have many nurses sort of reach out and sort of like thank you for what you're doing? You know, I want to speak out but I can't. Can you sort of my voice? Did you get much of that? Yeah,
I did. And I think once I finished the walk, I didn't realise how kind of traumatic that was for me.
What, the walk?
Yeah, because a lot of people would offload onto me all these stories of kind of tragedy and hurt, and, you know, I didn't have the resources to help everyone. Like, all I could do is kind of walk and talk and try my best to raise awareness and increase the number of conversations that people were having and increase curiosity. But then they would tell me all these stories, so that was quite difficult. And then lots of nurses would message me and come out to support me. And yeah, there were times that it was quite difficult because they would say, oh, you know, I really support what you're doing, but I can't do it because, okay. Yeah. And it, you know, we made adjustments because it was important to us. It was a priority to us. So it was very difficult, and it did feel like a big responsibility, because at the time it didn't feel like there was that many people, you know, certainly that would wear their uniform and, you know, at the protests and things and really just say, yeah, I'm a nurse and this is what's happening. Everything was kind of like behind the scenes and in big Telegram groups. And I guess what I would have liked to have achieved, which I didn't, was to get nurses standing together to kind of share the burden, because there was a lot of admin as well behind the scenes and stuff like that. So yeah, I completely understand why people didn't, but some days were harder than others to hear people's reasons.
Yes.
When I was kind of just stomping around. But I do understand, but it was difficult at times.
Yes. And it is that, like, there's, I mean, you can say excuse, it kind of is, but you can kind of understand, like, where the people are coming from. It's like, I can't do this because I'll lose my job, I'll lose my house. But it's like, at the time, it was like, well, you might just lose your very way of life. So, you know, it's like when you look at it metaphysically again, it's like people were getting challenged and tested, like, how much is your freedom worth? Are you willing to stand up for what you believe in? But then there is sort of the silent majority that a lot of people are sort of awake and they agree with a lot of things that we're talking about and don't trust the government and all this, but they don't know how to speak out about it. They don't want to speak out about it. And I don't know if you've noticed, but Instagram has recently changed its way it delivers your notifications, and it has a priority section.
Oh, okay.
It's very useful just to see like certain comments, but also there are certain individuals that are quite famous that I can see that are liking my posts. I'm like, you're awake? What? Wow. And obviously you see on their Instagram and nothing, they're not posting anything related to this, because you think your entire career is built upon this. So yes, it's interesting though.
It's frustrating. It is frustrating, because if everyone who didn't agree just said we don't agree, like, that would be it.
That'd be it, right?
That would be it.
Yes.
Yeah. So it is frustrating, but a lot of people get a lot of strength, and it's also not necessarily the right time for someone, and they need to build up their confidence. So I think that was one of the things that I wanted to do, was
lead by example, right?
Well, yeah. I'm a big believer in matching words and actions, but I think I wanted to help people have better conversations and understand what was going on. As in, understand their own feelings, as, you know, because people would say, like, oh, you're saying what I'm thinking. So for me, it was about trying to help those people kind of come to terms of what was going on, because there was definitely a lot of gaslighting going on where we were told we were the bad guys.
Yes. And so I'm wondering, what's your, like, self-care routine?
So I'm the biggest hypocrite going, although I was
Okay.
I was pretty good.
You're leading the lead, walking the walk, apart from.
Yeah, I was pretty good. And as I say, I had kind of surgery in September, and then with the editor kind of becoming overworked, and it just, since then, things haven't kind of quite gone to plan. But before then, I was going yoga 3 times a week. I was going to the gym 3 times a week. I was eating 80% well.
That's pretty good. I don't think you actually need to be 100% unless you're already sick.
80%. And to be honest, since then, I kind of, you know, so I think there's different seasons for everything. And right now, my season is...
Van season.
Van season. I am sorting out, putting all these things in place from now till January, and ultimately, as a result of getting that sorted, I'm sacrificing my self-care so that then from January, and that's not just because it's the new year or anything, it's just because I'll need another 6 weeks, and then I can get back to my routine. So do I know I'm not looking after myself very well? Yeah, I've put on weight. I'm not eating great. I had a bag of Magic Stars on the way here. But I'm also not giving myself a hard time, because that is my process right now. Yes. I know where I am, and I know that...
Well, if you're going to enjoy the Magic Stars, do it guilt-free.
Yeah, exactly. So this is my process. This is where I am. And then, you know, I will kind of move forwards, and the priorities will shift, whereas all the stuff with the van, all the stuff with work will kind of be sorted and organised, and then I can be the priority for the self-care again. But right. That would be it. The gym, I do circuit training because it's quick. I feel like I get a good workout. It's first thing in the morning. And then also I've got the dogs as well, so that's like an hour walk a day, and then my husband does the next walk.
And so you're still working as a nurse now, or?
So I'm self-employed, so that was why I was able to do what I did, because I didn't have a boss telling me what to do. But equally, the negative was that I thought we were going to lose everything. So it was a double-edged sword.
Yes. And so moving forward, what are your plans? Are you just going to be, is this the van life now? Yeah. What's the future like for you?
How we kind of started it, and it's probably a good place to end it, kind of looping right round, is the diversity in people and how they help people. And for me, all I can do is try and help people improve communication and try and reduce conflict, and also try and set up their own business to kind of gain that freedom. And I always say I'm no Alan Sugar, but most people don't want to be Alan Sugar. Most people just want to be able to support their family, support their lifestyle, and not have to rely on other people. So what we'll be doing is I'll be doing the van. I'll be talking to all sorts of people who are just interesting and just fun to talk to, because very often we say that, you know, we shouldn't be judgmental of people, and we say that we like diversity, but then we don't open up to it. So I really want to kind of walk the walk, talk the talk, and have all sorts of different people, even if I don't necessarily agree with what they're saying, be able to have that conversation and demonstrate to people that you can have a conversation with someone and not agree with everything they say, and that's okay.
Yes.
So that's what I've got in mind for that. And then putting on some kind of face-to-face training to help people with communication. Don't know what that looks like yet, but I'm going to do that. And then with the business stuff, so me and hubby have got a second podcast coming out in February, which will be, because we have the business as a couple, I will be asking couples to come on as well, or partnerships, because that's a different type of working relationship with somebody else than it is on your own. But I mean, that'll be someone I've got kind of like a list in mind at the moment, and they all seem to be like partnerships or couples. But basically anyone who has got their own business has got lessons that they've learned, so that people can learn the lessons from us rather than making the same ones, because that's all I know how to do. Like, that's all I can help people with. As I say, I'm not a scientist. I'm not any of these things that can, you know, I'm not Mike Yeardon. So all I can do is try and help people with communication and help people become more independent with their business.
Amazing. Well, I'm really curious to see how it all plays out.
Yeah. Do you know what? It'll be great. And I'll get the second podcast up and running, and Rob will be like, what were you stressing about? This is easy. You just talk and upload. Yes. It'll all be sorted by then.
Nice. And so do you have anything else you'd like to share with the people whilst I'm here in your van?
No, I don't think so. Let me think.
I'm on an incline. I'm spinning.
Let me think, because we can kind of like whiz through this. Do I have anything to share? Okay, so somebody said to me, how can we help with mass formation? And I guess my perspective is compassion, to show people compassion who maybe don't have the same insight to us. I think to challenge people. So, for example, when I walked around, what was clear to me was people were saying, the vaccine's on your way out, the vaccine's on your way out, the vaccine's on your way out. Wouldn't matter what city I was in, the vaccine's on your way out. And actually asking, but what does that mean? And when have you ever said that before? Knowing when to stop talking. And I think that too many people, from what I've observed, just want to say everything they know or everything they think they know. And there's a difference between what we know and what we think we know. But just say everything and then criticise the other person for knowing nothing. So I think we need to know when to stop, and curiosity is better than conflict.
It can be hard though. If you're talking to someone, you almost know they're just repeating what the BBC's told them today.
Yeah, so then just pick one thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that might be then the vaccine's the only way out. Like, I've heard you say that a lot. Like, where's this come from? Like, I've never heard you say it before.
Yes.
And then just get the person thinking about that. So for us, we do have to be quite... I
think compassion was a good word.
Yeah, but the other word I'm thinking of is disciplined, because it's very easy just to say you are wrong. It's more difficult to have a conversation and respect where that other person is coming from. So yeah, the mass formation, I think compassion, communication, challenge their beliefs with kindness, and curiosity is better than conflict.
Cool. And so where could people find more of what you do?
So it's that Nurse Who Asks Questions on all the social platforms. Yeah. So, and then with the business podcast, I will be uploading that from February, and then I'll be sharing that on that Nurse Who Asks Questions, so that people can kind of know where to find me.
Awesome. Well, it's been a pleasure, Jenna. Speak to you
Thank
in
you
the
very
van.
much. Thank you.
Yes.